a regular LLC?
The funding source is the primary difference, and that's all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to come to me and want to set up a LLC to invest in real estate, and you were just putting your personal money into it, you could go ahead and write your checks and take your income and do whatever you needed to do. You could add funds whenever you needed to. There's a number of things you could do. With the self-directed IRA, the funding source, because it is a tax-deferred or a tax-free Roth funding source, must comply at all times with the rules against prohibited transactions that the IRS imposes.
Okay. What are some limitations of self-directed IRAs and Roths that the Checkbook LLC helps to solve?
Well, as I mentioned one of them earlier, and that is the speed of the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Take, for example, Mike, a lot of people that go down to the courthouse steps to buy property. They need to have that money liquid and ready to go right then. They don't know what the price is going to be. They need to be able to make those payments right on the spot.
So we're talking about like foreclosure type properties.
Correct.
Yeah, that are still on courthouse steps.
And there's other real estate transactions that are happening at a fairly high speed, and where the need is to quickly write checks and to you hear about a deal at 8 in the morning and you have to have a check in by noon in order to get the deal. Mm-hmm. The other type of transaction is where there's multiple checks that need to be written for multiple small costs, rehabs, contractors, fix-ups, liens, other things that you need to do. If you're using a traditional custodian, each of those will incur a separate fee. Mm-hmm. And so you want to probably avoid those fees by having an LLC. So the advantages are both the speed of the transaction and to limit the number of fees that your custodian's going to have to charge to process them.
So it'll really help to reduce your operating costs related to the property, because you don't have to generate all these different checks and so on and go through the bureaucracy of getting it processed through the custodian and so forth.
That's true. It can be a nightmare, and it can be a waited 3 or 4 days for even the best custodian to review all the paperwork.
Okay. So let's see here. Why is real estate an appealing investment for IRAs and Roths right now?
I think right now, if you look at the stock market's performance over the last few years, last couple of years, people have been pretty discouraged. It's made some recovery from its famous drop since the 2008, but real estate can now be a good investment. Many investors are looking at anywhere from 12 to 15 or 20% returns. So this is the type of return that most investors would like to get with any kind of money. Mm-hmm. But the advantage of using your IRA is that it may be a few years before you plan to use those funds. Mm-hmm. So using your IRA for a real estate investment, you can go into a transaction and have it sit there and earn the money back in a tax-free or tax-deferred income back to your IRA.
Yeah. So I think what it boils down to, the IRA or the Roth, it may not be the ideal format for making some of these investments sometimes, but on the other hand, it may be the only place that you've got that kind of cash available.
You nailed it, Mike. That may be the only cash you have available to do any investing with.
Yeah. And right now, I mean, it's not like real estate has never lost value, because obviously it has taken its gas in the last few years, just like the stock market. But there's an old saying, I think, that when there's blood on the streets, there's money to be made. And so, and one person's disaster is another person's great deal. And so there's some great deals that are around right now.
There are. I think the price points are right now with real estate is another reason that people are looking at it. Yeah. Because the amount of money they have in their IRAs allows them, in some cases, to purchase an entire property outright and derive the income without having to go through conventional lending.
Right. And so it may not be the case in Silicon Valley, although I've talked to some people that have got properties here, $250,000 or even less. To me, it seems wild, because from where we've been, just a few years ago. But on the other hand, there are other places in the country where you can pick up, a house for $10,000.
That's right.
So it's kind of crazy, but it's hard for us to get our heads around from where we are. But it is a possibility. Okay, well, what are some of the mechanics about how a checkbook LLC is structured and how it operates?
All right, it's fairly simple, but there are certain required steps. The first thing you need to do is you have to reserve and register your LLC with the Secretary of State. You must have an operating agreement. You must get a taxpayer identification number and open up a checking account into which your IRA funds can be deposited so that you can function.
Okay. So, now can the LLC have owners in addition to the IRA or the Roth account? And related to this, can the account owner and family members participate? What sorts of limitations are there?
Well, there's several limitations. The Department of Labor and the IRS have several restrictions. The most famous of course, is the 4975 requirements against prohibited transactions. And basically, to boil it down, it has to be an arm's length transaction. You can't invest with your family members. You cannot give money to your son, buy a condominium for your son going off to college. You cannot use the money to buy your vacation home. These are prohibited transactions because anything that involves you personally getting a direct or indirect benefit from the investment is prohibited. So the use of the IRA must be done with an arm's length transaction. There are ways to combine personal funds and other IRAs into a single LLC, but again, these become fairly complex transactions that you need to consult with a professional to set up so you don't run afoul of the regulations.
Yeah. So there's some things related to this that, there's possibilities. There are things that you can do, and then there's a question of what you should do.
Yes.
And one of the issues related to these, as I understand it, is that you really need to have sufficient funds really long term when you set up the thing up front, that you don't want to continue having people put money in from the personal and IRA funds, because these are things that can cause some difficulties down the road.
So for example, if you're buying a fourplex in Phoenix, or you can get them now for $80,000. They were selling for $350,000 a couple years ago. You can buy an entire fourplex and rent it out. You'll need another $20,000 or so to rehab it and get it rent ready. But if all you put into your IRA checking LLC is $100,000, you're tapped out. And if something breaks, or you need a new roof, or there's something else there, you have to wait until you can refund your IRA LLC with IRA money. You cannot mix personal funds after the fact with your IRA. So in order to do that, you have to keep a contingency reserve set aside. You have to plan ahead, as you said, and understand there are going to be emergency expenses that you need to take care of, and all of the funds need to be paid for out of your IRA LLC.
Okay. So maybe we can go into a little more detail related to prohibited transactions as far as what they are.
We'll try.
Okay, let's give it a whirl. Well,
the first rule, of course, is you cannot combine your funds with your IRA. And in other words, you cannot simply write a check, your own personal check, to make up for a deficiency in the IRA funds, nor can you pay yourself. A lot of real estate agents are used to earning their living by making commissions. So if you get involved in a real estate transaction using an IRA, and you're investing in the property, you cannot take a commission. That's probably the most common question I get asked is, can I take a commission if I'm a real estate agent? And the answer is no. You cannot derive personal or direct benefit in any way. Can you use the property for your own personal benefit? No. So for example, if you buy a vacation home, I had a call earlier today of someone wanting to buy a vacation home in Hawaii. That's great. Or another client called and said they wanted to buy a business property and move their office over to Hawaii. Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Just can't use your IRA to do that. So you also are advised against and cannot give money to your parents or to your children, or they cannot also benefit directly or indirectly. So if you buy that condominium in Hawaii, your kids can't stay there, and your parents can't stay there. So those are the kinds of rules that 4975 prohibits most clearly.
Can we talk a little